manager who's obviously got an ability to manage a football club well. And actually,
you'd like to think so, wouldn't you, Ollie? It's easy to pay millions a year. Fingers crossed, mate.
I mean, what a time to be alive.
I mean, that is a low dopamine situation. When you're watching Teletext and you were just waiting for the page to refresh.
But the Open is still part of that. Like, why are they only charging 80 quid? And I hope they continue to only charge 80, 85 quid for the first couple of days.
It's because Brits can't afford more than that, mate.
Yeah.
Whereas Americans can afford to spend 300, 400, 500 grand on a... Hello and welcome along to Not Another Sports Pod, episode number 45 with myself, David, and Mr. Oliver Wilson on the pod today. Ollie, lots and lots to get through, mate. I want to review the FA Cup final and the most insane refereeing decision I've seen this year. I want to talk about the Premier League and actually is finishing 6th, possibly better for some of these clubs than finishing 5th. I want to preview the Europa League final, maybe the biggest football game of the season in terms of potential repercussions. What else? I want to actually lean on you for, I know this is a bit old news, but Sampdoria got relegated down to the third tier of Italian football. I've got a bet of the year, by the way, a 351 Dave Windsor's tip of the year that I want to share with Not Another Sports Pod listeners. Please gamble responsibly. I'm sure Ollie wants to talk about the golf last night. There was some F1 and lots else, lots of other stuff in between. So, hello, Mr. Oliver Wilson. How are you, mate?
Oh, good, man. That's an energetic intro, which I'm going to bring down very quickly with just being, Monday morning. Weekend of work and staying up late watching the golf. So if I'm slightly sluggish still at around about midday as we record this, so be it. But as always, Dave, I'll let you bring the positivity, the vibrancy, and I'll bring the sour grapes. And, it'll work.
Hell of a combo, my friend. Hell of a combo. Bit of housekeeping, first of all. So next week, Ollie Wilson, as you do, is commentating on triathlon from Sardinia. Is the triathlon actually in Sardinia?
2 weeks' time, yeah, in Sardinia.
In 2 weeks' time, Ollie?
Yeah.
Okay, because I was going to say this could be our last pod for a while, but so next Monday, we probably should discuss this.
No, next
okay,
Monday.
Well, you know what, listeners?
I'm in Scotland.
Just refresh whatever you use to listen to your podcast. And if we're there, we're there. And if we're not, we don't owe you anything. We'll pod when we want to pod. So, yeah, don't worry about it. We could be packed.
At the moment, your mates who are listeners are trying to take money off me out of my pocket with this 100 holes of golf by taking me up on the
Ollie,
challenge.
My mates who are listeners are 90% of the audience, so we need to be extremely careful about alienating the fan base.
You need to be extremely careful about alienating the fan base. I am. The gloves are off. Don't care.
One thing I noticed before we crack on with the pod, I don't want to go on and on about the taxis here, but I do, I'm almost certainly dying in an autopista in Buenos Aires. There was a massive storm the other day, Ollie. And when there's a crazy storm and the hail, the rain's coming down so fierce, people drive in a completely different way and they slow right down, they half the speed they'd normally do or a third of the speed, leave huge gaps. And they did that on the motorway here. And what I realised is that them doing that is actually how people drive normally in Britain. So just space between the cars, just, an appreciation that something could go wrong, that kind of stuff. So it took an extreme torrential rain and a storm for people to match the driving that you could experience elsewhere.
Does this mean you're doing rain dances on the roof of the Airbnb to try and get it to torrentially rain so you can at least travel safely on every single trip now across Buenos Aires? Would you sacrifice the sun for the safety of the taxis?
No, I can't. The joy I get, Ollie, from opening up the curtains here and standing on the terrace with my morning coffee, overlooking the LATAM beautiful crumbling skyline is just so it is a disproportionate amount of joy that one man can get just from viewing a city skyline. So unfortunately I can't give that up. Should we talk about a little bit of football then?
Let's get into the football. Look, I know where you're going straight away, so just rant away, Dave. I'll let you have the floor.
Well, FA Cup final, Crystal Palace win a trophy for the first time in their 120-year history. I'm not going to give some kind of eulogy about Crystal Palace. Let's applaud them, Fantastic. If you're a Palace fan, some of my cousins are actually. Amazing, fantastic, joyous, unbelievable accomplishment. And just what can you say? Everyone wanted Crystal Palace to win, including myself, right? But other people have done this appreciation of Crystal Palace. So I do want to talk about the game itself. First of all, I think I was watching a different game to everyone else, Ollie. Because afterwards, I heard that, Man City weren't very good and Palace dug in. They deserved the win. That's not really what I saw. what I saw was Manchester City completely dominating the game. Dean Henderson should have been sent off, which we'll get into. Manchester City missed a penalty. Doku, Harland, Echeverri, and a couple of others extracted really good saves from Henderson. City were the better side. Like, I know that doesn't fit the narrative, and I'm pleased Palace won, and that's amazing, and they won't care who was the better side, but I just felt like reading some of the reviews afterwards and hearing some stuff on the radio, I was like, I watched a different game to everyone else, because I thought Man City battered them. I really did, and I thought on another day, they win that final 3 or 4-1, and it's very comfortable. So, look, I'm no Man City fan. I think I'm so pleased Palace won, but I didn't quite understand the aftermath. And the decision not to send off Dean Henderson, the Crystal Palace goalkeeper, was, in my opinion, the worst decision I've seen all season. I don't like VAR. I think it has killed the sport, and I want to get into that in a moment. But if you're going to have VAR, that is literally the exact reason why you would have VAR. To overturn a clear and obvious error in a massive game that is a defining moment. That is literally the reason it exists. Erling Haaland is through on goal, and Dean Henderson's outside his box, and he palms the ball away from Erling Haaland, so Erling Haaland can't get there. If he doesn't do that, Erling Haaland's clean through on goal. It is a clear goal-scoring opportunity. The referee got it wrong. What offends me is that is a one replay decision. Like, you look at that once, maybe twice to see a different angle. It is such an obvious red card. And the other way round, if that had robbed Palace the chance to win their first trophy in 120 years, Ollie, we would never have heard the end of it. I don't care about Man City. I'm pleased they lost. Everyone is. And because it's everyone's like, oh, well, City have won loads of trophies. Who cares? I get all that. But let's just acknowledge that is the most insanely poor decision that we've seen this season.
I'm really surprised to hear you say this, to be honest, because I always kind of figured from what you've said on this podcast and off air in the past that you were kind of a big fan of VAR and a big proponent of it, and you enjoyed how it's come in. It's a radical new turn that you've taken on this idea that VAR actually might be a negative. I mean, of course it's the worst looking decision that we'll have for VAR. It's a game-changing decision that was so easy to overturn that didn't happen. And that is why this whole VAR system needs to be completely scrapped or completely rewritten and rejigged in this off-season when the Premier League curtain kind of comes down and before this starts again in August. Because if you can't get that right, but we're spending 5 minutes looking over minute decisions 2 minutes before a goal to see if that challenge has affected the build-up play of a goal and therefore impacted whether the goal should be allowed to stand or not. It's completely not doing its job at this point. And it's such a damnation on VAR as a system and how it's run for it to have happened in an FA Cup final. And it just can't go on like this anymore. It just can't go on like this anymore because it's useless. I mean, the fact that Wayne Rooney at half-time on the BBC's coverage is so close about 3 times to saying, just fucking get rid of it. I mean,
he basically does say that.
Yeah, I mean, so close to swearing on the beep. Like, you know, you don't hear it very often from pundits in a chair getting that close. Only maybe Roy Keane. And it just shows how irate and frustrated managers and viewers of the game are because they're not representing the players at that point. They're kind of representing us and being a voice for us as the audience watching it because we can all see that it's messed up. And then there's like a panicky release statement at halftime from the FA or the Referees Association, to kind of say, well, because of this and this and this, and in these situations, actually, we deemed that it wasn't a red card. And it's like, it's just, you're trying to cover your own back on a glaring error that you can't go back and change, which is ironic because VAR is designed to be able to go back and change glaring errors. So it's useless. And it has tainted a cup final that was great. I don't necessarily disagree with you that City were the better side. I think the comparable is so simple to go back to the great kind of Barca against Atleti games that we'd see maybe 8-9 years ago when Atleti would sit in, force Barca to try and play a ball into a busy 18-yard box when they didn't have much aerial ability, and then would try and hit on the counter-attack. And they made a living off that, Atleti, against Real Madrid and against Barca. And it's a very dangerous thing to do. And Palace, I think, while you'd say they were played off the park by Man City in terms of ball possession, chances created, you'd also say that actually that was probably Crystal Palace's game plan, to smother, to cover that defensive third diligently, and then hope they can hit something on the counter-attack, because they're a great counter-attacking side. They've done it all year against the big sides in the Premier League this season. They're a really good team going forward in terms of direct, fast-paced football. So it's hard to say who was the better side, I would say, in my opinion, because Palace executed the game plan that they wanted to execute to perfection to get the victory. So that's why I can understand why people think Palace were the better side. Especially when you come away with an FA Cup in your hands at the end of the day.
You know, I don't want to take anything away from like Oliver Glasner, as you say. Like, if executing your exact game plan works, how can the other side be the better side if that's what you wanted to do? And that is exactly what happens. I do get that. I just want to. I'm not going to bang on about VAR all the time, and I think you've very eloquently summed it up there, Ollie. But I did just scribble down 5 reasons why VAR's killed football. So let me just get this out of the way before we talk about the Premier League.
Do we need like a jingle?
5 reasons why I believe that VAR has killed football. Number 1, it has robbed us of the most beautiful thing about the beautiful game, which is the emotion. The split second after the ball hits the back of the net. That has gone forever. For fans, for players, for people inside the stadium, for people watching on TV, it's gone, it's finished. You can no longer celebrate a goal. We have sacrificed that, okay? Number 2, momentum's gone. You can no longer score, grab the ball, and be back playing again within 25 seconds because you put the ball on the centre circle. So that Istanbul moment, the 3 goals in 6 minutes, the Man United scoring 2 goals in a couple of minutes against Bayern Munich in the Champions League final, that's gone, that's finished. The momentum after scoring has gone because there's always a VAR check. 3, we're just taking football too seriously. The world will keep spinning no matter what happens. We're literally taking football too seriously. If you want to follow a game or a sport that is definitively black and white, go and play chess. Like, football has always existed in these grey areas of you walk out of ground and is it a penalty, is it not? Not sure. That looked on. Was he level? It's fine, guys. Like, football's just not that important. Like, there is more important things in the world. You can lose a final on a dodgy decision and everything will keep existing. Number 4, I can tell Ollie's enjoying this. We've stripped referees of any sense of authority to the point where they're all terrified of making a decision because their bosses upstairs are actually going to make the decision. We may as well cut to the chase here and just have a man running around with a green and red button in his hand and an earpiece and someone telling him what every decision is and he just says green or red. Like, that's where we're going here. We just strip referees of all decision, of all authority. And this has had VAR's also had unintended consequences because that fella at Nottingham Forest the other day got injured, right? Because the game's played on because the lino doesn't want to lift up his flag because he thinks, I'm not sure, so I'll let someone else make the decision. VAR's had so many unintended consequences, it's insane. And then finally, number 5, it just hasn't fixed anything. Like, it just hasn't fixed anything. After an FA Cup final, we're still talking about a dodgy decision. It's created this entire ripple effect of loads of other, like, random stuff that's not good for the sport. And it hasn't actually fixed anything. Maybe 1 or 2 decisions are a little bit better, maybe. But there's absolutely no question in my mind that VAR is a massive net deficit for the sport. I'm not going to bang on about it on every episode of this podcast, but I just don't see in its current form how it does anything other than take 10 to 15% off the sport. And finally, there is such an arrogance in football that football will just continue to be the most popular sport in the world. There's such an arrogance that in 10 years, 20 years, 50 years, generations of young kids will just tune in and watch, and those viewing figures will remain sky high forever. That is not a guarantee. If you look at the sources of entertainment that young people have, that is not a guarantee. It's not when we were growing up, Ollie, where it was like there was 4 channels on telly and teletext, and you had to like football because really there was not much else to get involved in. There really wasn't. It's not like that now. So this arrogance that football will just continue to be the dominant sport in the world no matter what is misguided. And you have to keep the most beautiful thing about football, which is the currency of a goal. And I think we've tinkered with that. And do not think that won't have massive implications in the future.
God, I miss Teletext. I really miss that, like, music on at 3:00 in the living room. My old man's listening to something, and you stick the TV on with teletext, and you just have this 2-3 pages of scores from the Premier League and seeing those change until, like, Grandstand comes back on and starts doing the kind of final run-in with the classifieds and final score and stuff. What a time to be alive.
I mean, that is a low dopamine situation. When you're watching teletext and you were just waiting for the page to refresh. That is a different universe, man. Let's not go down nostalgic rabbit hole, because next thing I'll be,
I'm going to disagree with you slightly in that.
Go on.
Getting angry about, football isn't the be all and end all. Because unfortunately, it kind of is at this point. The stakes that are kind of on every single football game and every single league season for people that are nowhere near involved with playing on the pitch are actually incredibly high. And we've touched on it before about how things like relegation from a Premier League or a Championship, those two leagues in particular, is damning for lots of people at a football club. When we've been discussing Manchester United, it's not just the players on the pitch that are being kind of put through the ringer with all the cuts that are being made at Manchester United. It's the people behind the scenes that work there. So football is that important. Not making the Champions League, and we'll come on to this, of course, when we talk about Tottenham and Manchester United coming up in the Europa League final. It's massively important for people that work in and around and are associated with those clubs. So making sure we get the correct decision, because we have put so much onus, and let's face it, so much money on what happens at the end of a season to a football team, it becomes that important. And so we do have to make sure we get it right. But as you touched on, it doesn't. It hasn't changed anything. And we still have bad decisions and incorrect decisions. And this weekend, we had the most clear-cut incorrect decision that wasn't changed. And it's just a shambles.
Before we talk about the Premier League and everything else on the pod, just one question. So Erling Haaland doesn't take the penalty. Omar Marmoush takes it. And afterwards in the post-match press conference, Pep Guardiola says it's up to the players to decide on the pitch. Do you think that's a good thing that Pep Guardiola is gifting the authority of the moment to his footballers because he trusts them and he can't understand the individual feelings of those footballers at that exact time, and so therefore they are better placed to make a decision? Or do you think it should be clearly done on data where every player at Manchester City takes 100 penalties in pre-season, you figure out the metrics and you say, okay, if Marmoush is on the pitch, he's number one, if Harland's on the pitch, he's number two, etc., etc. Where do you stand on that?
I think you just have whoever wants to take it, but you've decided that well ahead of time. I think you have a designated penalty taker for Manchester City. That should be the case. There should be a rank and file and order. How you get to that, I don't really care. You could have an in-training penalty eliminator where you keep taking penalties until somebody comes out as a victor, and they're your penalty taker for the rest of the season. I don't like the idea of it being decided in the moment on the field. I think every club should just have a ranking order, because that makes it easier when you go to, penalty shootouts in Champions Leagues, FA Cups, League Cups, etc. Everybody knows where they stand, where they are in the order, and they can be mentally prepared for it, because that squad list goes 1 to 25 in order of takers. And depending on who's on the field at that point, you just go, right, you're on, you're on, you're on, you're on, you're on, you're on. You're in that order.
But that doesn't take into account, Ollie, the fact that you could get a penalty 17 minutes in. Marmoush is the penalty taker, but he's already missed a sitter. He's on a yellow card. He hasn't had a great start to the game, and his brain starts moving a little bit, right? So I think what Pep Guardiola is trying to say is that he can't possibly know how each individual player is feeling in the moment.
But you're a professional.
Is that too woke for you?
You're just a professional. I wouldn't say it's too woke, but if you're having a bad game and you get the opportunity from 12 yards to stick one away, imagine the confidence that'll give you if you do finish it. And let's face it, the odds are in the striker's favour when it comes to finishing penalties. So, actually, yeah, I don't... If you're having a bad game, give the guy the ball, if you want to put it that way. I think the complete opposite of what you're trying to say there. Also, there's a level of responsibility that has to be taken, right? I mean, responsibility is a good thing. It creates leaders. It creates an order and an idea that people know what their roles are, what their jobs are, and what they're meant to do. So giving people that responsibility straight away so that they have to take that responsibility, I only see as a positive thing. But now we're getting into more life philosophy than who should be taking a set piece and or a penalty.
That's the essence of this podcast in many ways.
We look at sport, but we take it into people's day-to-day lives. Yeah.
Let's talk Premier League. Look, it's the only thing interesting about the Premier League this season, pretty much, is the race for the top 5 and with it a place in the Champions League, right? Liverpool and Arsenal obviously have got their place in the Champions League. Newcastle United in 3rd at 66 points and Nottingham Forest in 7th on 65. It's exciting, man. It's really interesting. But I want to make a different point before we kind of predict maybe who's going to finish in that top 5. My point is this. If you just park the money situation, just park that 100 million that comes with being in the Champions League, Ollie. Just put it to the side. From a pure fan's perspective, I would argue that for those football clubs, for Newcastle, for Chelsea, for Aston Villa, and for Nottingham Forest, it is actually better from a fan's perspective to finish 6th because you can go on and win the Europa League. Those clubs aren't going to win the Champions League. Okay, Chelsea might have something to say there, but Nottingham Forest, Aston Villa and Newcastle they're not going to win the Champions League. Whereas if they go into the Europa League, there is a really, really strong chance that one of those clubs lifts a European trophy and lifts that competition. So from a pure fan's perspective, I would actually say it's better to finish 6th outside the Champions League spots, have a great run at the Europa League, have those great away days, maybe lift the trophy. I mean, if Tottenham and Manchester United can get to the final, because there's no clubs that drop down after the group stage of the Champions League, the Europa League is weaker in the knockout stages. And therefore, you're Nottingham Forest and you could win the Europa League. And that is actually, by the way, if you're in the Europa League, you've got a great chance of finishing in the Champions League, a better chance than you do through the league, the Premier League. So if Nottingham Forest are in the Europa League next season, Ollie, they have a better chance of finishing in the Champions League the season after that because they can win the Europa League. So everyone else is playing checkers out there. I'm playing chess, mate. I'm telling you that for Newcastle United Football Club, for Aston Villa and for Nottingham Forest, I'm telling you that from a fan's perspective and actually for the whole club's perspective, but let's just say from the fans' perspective, it is better to finish 6th. That is a hill I will die on, mate.
You've absolutely destroyed these two major European competitions now in the Europa League and the Europa Conference League. Because you're saying it is easier for an English side to win those than it is to compete for a top 5 spot in the Premier League, which may be true. True. But
maybe.
I think
have you seen who's in the Europa League final this year? So, it is easier to win the Europa League than it is to finish in the top 5 in the Premier League.
So why am I caring now, aside from maybe a Champions League berth, about either of those two competitions? Because you make it sound like, and let's face it, look, there's been a strong kind of era of Spanish dominance in the Europa League, particularly with the likes of Sevilla and others. But you're making it sound like every single year, and I don't necessarily disagree with this idea, we're going to have at least one of the sides in each of those finals being an English side, and they are going to win the Europa League or the Conference League. And that's really boring to me. That defeats the point of having continental competition again if we know that it's going to be an English side in it in the final at the end of it, and if it's going to be an English side lifting that trophy. You're making it sound like there is no point watching those competitions at all, because the only reason to be in the Europa League final is to have a Champions League berth. It's not really about lifting the trophy almost at that point. Because I think if you ask Villa fans not to guarantee them the Europa League, but say a Europa League final or having the quarter-final nights that they had in the Champions League this year, I think there'd be a lot of Villa fans that would like the Champions League quarter-final nights.
Wow! Don't think so, mate.
Do you not?
A European final, Ollie, has to be the pinnacle of being a fan.
But you've just degraded those two finals completely.
Have you heard the... Say again?
You've just degraded and devalued those two finals completely to the point where I'm like, what is the even point of them? It's just a chance for English sides to lift more silverware, basically, at this point. Like, it's not interesting. Whereas those nights of listening to the Champions League anthem play out before kickoff, not echoing because the noise would be freaking vibrant as it always is on those nights, ringing out around Villa Park, ringing out around St James's Park. Ringing out potentially around the City Ground would be unbelievable. Whereas,
Ollie, are you telling me that Europa League anthem with Bodo Glimt at home. You telling me that doesn't pack the same punch as a Champions League anthem at home against Real Madrid?
What,
you absolute snob.
The moaning monks that are doing the Europa League anthem. Ooh, ooh, ooh. It doesn't have the same impact at all, I'm afraid. And you think about it, what it will still take to get potentially to those finals of the Europa League or the Conference League. Whereas just knowing you're going to have 8 games of Champions League football with those nights, that will sell seats. You might not sell out some grounds with the Europa League group stage games. You'll sell out grounds with Champions League nights, particularly for sides like Forest and Villa.
I think you sell those out. But I tell you. So hang on. Do you think therefore? Let's say Nottingham Forest, right? They finished 6th. Let's take Newcastle. Newcastle finished 6th this season, okay, Ollie, and are in the Europa League next season. In pre-season, do you think Eddie Howe's thinking it's easier for me to win the Europa League or easier for me to finish top 5 in the Premier League? That's a coin toss, right? Because they'll be favourites. Newcastle would be favourites for the Europa League next year.
Yeah. Yeah, you wouldn't expect United and Spurs to have the seasons that they've had again. There could be another side that comes through like a Forest that puts their name in the hat as well to be competitive. I mean, we were lauding the likes of the Brentford and Bournemouth this season, particularly Bournemouth, who've kind of fallen away. Palace look strong potentially and look like they could maybe build off this FA Cup victory as well. So yeah, you're probably right in terms of the Premier League is more competitive for getting into a top 5 spot. But you can never take anything for granted on the continent because look, Athletic Club did nothing really in the end in the semi-finals of the Europa League. But you never know if that is going to be a different looking Athletic Club or a different mentality for Athletic Club that Newcastle has suddenly really struggled with. I don't think you can actually take anything for granted when it comes to the Europa League. So I think if you were to offer Eddie Howe a path to a Europa League final or a path to the top 5, I think he'd probably take a top 5.
I want to talk about the Europa League. Well, let's just talk about the top 5 in the Premier League. Who do you fancy? I mean, it's super tight, isn't it? Newcastle on 66 points, Chelsea on 66, Villa on 66. Man City will do it because they've got that game in hand. Manchester City currently have 65 points. I think they're home against Bournemouth and away at Fulham. And 69 points is going to see you finishing in that top 5. So it's going to be Liverpool, Arsenal, Man City third. And then I think it is Villa and Newcastle. Newcastle home against Everton final day. I think they win that. They end up on 69 as well. And I think Aston Villa, I believe they go to Old Trafford final day. And Nottingham Forest, they go to Old Trafford final day. And Forest and Chelsea play each other.
The City ground.
But I think it's Liverpool, Arsenal, Man City, Newcastle, and Villa squeeze in there in 5th.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think Chelsea are going to be the ones that get muscled out because of playing Forest on the final day. I think that they'll probably end up sharing the spoils. The other sides will find the results they need, and that'll be it. But it seems a huge anticlimax to this Premier League season, doesn't it? You know, December, January, there was so much hope of real roller coaster rides in, and you've got like embarrassing Tottenham and Manchester United that are going to get away with it really easily when it comes to the relegation fight. You've got, it would have been so much more interesting if someone like an Ipswich had made a real fist fight of potentially staying up and have been able to at least put a little bit of heebie-jeebies on Postecoglou and Amorim. And then, it's just an inevitability, really. It wouldn't surprise me if Villa end up being the ones that miss out for whatever reason. Chelsea do enough to win and beat Forest on the road, and that top 5 is suddenly looking very much like a top 5 that you would have probably predicted at the start of the season. And who cares about the Europa League and the Conference League anyway, because the English clubs are going to win it next year, so it doesn't matter who finishes in those spots, whichever order it is. Is that race suddenly for the Europa League or the Conference League basically deciding a Champions League spot for the following year? I think that's what you've got to ask yourself, Dave, because...
Say that again, rephrase that again, or let me make sure I understand that.
So the Premier League race to be in the Europa League or the Conference League this year is actually, in your wild world, a Champions League spot decider for not next season, but the season after. Yeah.
Whichever English club finishes in the Europa League place this season, I believe they will go on and win the Europa League. Yes. So I believe if Newcastle or Chelsea are in the Europa League, I think they'll win that competition. Therefore, I think they'll be in the Champions League the season after. So therefore, they can rest players in the Premier League next season because they know that the season after that, they'll be in the Champions League courtesy of the Europa League. I mean, it's getting very complicated.
Palace are going to be in the Champions League via winning the Europa League after winning the FA Cup. It's going to be the glorious 3 years of success. An FA Cup win, stick them in the Europa League. So they won't be the side that finishes in that 6th place in the Premier League. So it'll be Palace against, say, Forest or Man City, and it'll and Palace will win and take the Champions League spot for 2 years' time.
That could be the new route, couldn't it? FA Cup, Europa League, Champions
League. Is it easier to win an FA Cup than it is to win the Europa League?
It's easier to win back-to-back FA Cup and Europa League than it is to finish in the top 5, maybe. Right, let's talk about the Europa League final. I think there's always a danger in overplaying things, Ollie, but this is the biggest football match of the season. It's a £100 million game. It's an isolated one-off football match. It is the biggest game of the season. Tottenham against Manchester United in Bilbao in the Europa League final. Not because the side that wins it is necessarily going to go on to have a decade of dominance and brilliance, but because the side that loses that final is, I'm not going to say destroyed and finished forever, but certainly the side that loses that final is in for a terrible next 2 or 3 seasons to reset. Because if Tottenham lose that final, Ange Postecoglou goes, his philosophy goes, they'll have to completely reshuffle the squad. Their best players will leave. They've got no European football next season. They're in big, big trouble, Tottenham. Manchester United. If Manchester United lose the Europa League final, Ruben Amorim's future will no doubt be in massive question. Financially, they're in all sorts of trouble. Like, their best players, if they've even got any, will have to leave. The entire overhaul of the squad won't be possible because they won't have the money. They'll have to lay off more of the canteen staff, etc., etc. The ripple-down effect will be huge. So it's not about who wins the Europa League final. It's about who loses the Europa League final. And the team that loses that Europa League final is absolutely
up a creek without a paddle. Yeah.
100%. Losing that Europa League final is bad.
That is the insight of a sports journalist. Losing the Europa League final is bad. It's almost as good as the In the Loop, difficult, lemon, difficult. If anybody's watched that movie, phenomenal line. Yeah, I mean, you have to remember that the loser of this, it's not like Tottenham or United have a Europa League position to fall back on either. There's nothing there for them. They become a run-of-the-mill, average Premier League side at best, whoever loses this. And you will not have the ability to draw in names, quality, without any sort of European football. It's hard enough if you're only in the Europa League or the Conference League to be able to have a bit of star power. But that's why I think Tottenham need to win this more than Manchester United. Because at least Manchester United has that name. It was enough to pull Ruben Amorim in without him kind of putting up a bit of a fight, wanting to stay at Sporting, who won the league this week. And, I think that probably hurt him more than anything else when he looks back at what his former club was doing this weekend and celebrating a trophy lift. But, yeah, I think United still have the pedigree and the name, regardless of what Jim Ratcliffe's doing with the club and the financial shortcomings and shortfalling that they're doing in terms of the money that they're investing in it. But they do have that name. Tottenham don't have that. Tottenham, you could probably go to Southeast Asia and say Tottenham, and the first thing that people will go will be either Heung-min Son or Bottle Job, because they have that reputation of being the team that just doesn't do it when they really need to, whether it's big games, cup finals, etc. So they need this, I think, more than United. Postecoglou's going anyway. Like, the rebuild of Tottenham with manager, potentially elements of the squad, obviously, there's always going to be change in a summer window. It has to have some sort of European football, so it has to be this or nothing.
Who do you think is going to win it?
If I'm honest, I really don't care. Really, because it's two clubs that Tottenham are going to lose. One of my favourite things about Tottenham this season in Ange Postecoglou, and there is that little bit of me that would love him to kind of sign off and walk away from Daniel Levy. Like, walk out with the trophy. Kind of a Mourinho-y type thing, I imagine would do. Yeah, just walks off past the team coach, still holding the trophy. 2 years. 2 bloody years. Whereas United is such a horribly run club off the pitch and becoming such a kind of a nasty entity in football right now that I think I do prefer Tottenham. They've gone and built an exceptional football ground, a stunning arena, with a little bit of bias, of course, because they put the NFL games there and all that kind of stuff. But it's a phenomenal stadium. They're quite a likeable side. There's not many people in that Tottenham side that you go, oh, don't like him. Oh, he's a moaner or whatever. And I had a bit of an affinity to them of watching them come through the kind of the Van der Vaart era into the Christian Eriksen era and Pochettino. And I still had a very much a soft spot for that part of North London during that time. Whereas United is just a shambles. And it's almost like you want to completely scorch the earth to rebuild that club and get itself sorted. So I would rather Tottenham, but in terms of who edges it, I could probably see United doing it. I think they've just got that little bit more grit, power, determination. A few key players.
They did batter the 4th best side in Spain over 2 legs. So I do think that Man United side is better than Tottenham. I haven't seen Tottenham play well really all season. I was going to do something here that I'm not going to do, Ollie, because I think you'd hate it probably, mate. But because this podcast goes out on like Monday, Tuesday, right? So what I was going to do is I was going to give 2 alternate reactions, one for Ange Postecoglou winning the trophy and one for Ruben Amorim, and then just leave them there and then clip them up for a social short, depending on who'd won the trophy.
But we're genuine. We're the authentic article, aren't we? We're not those guys that are going to have pre-prepared videos to go on social media.
We're the least publicised pod. We'd like the anti-pod. Do
you want to listen to 2 white men moaning in a void with nobody else listening? You should listen to this. That's what this is. What I find really...
If I was going to do it, if Ange Postecoglou did win it would go something like this. But yeah.
What I find really interesting about this, right, is I was privy to overhearing a conversation between some managers a few days ago. And there was this football manager who said, I knew Ruben Amorim was going to be a failure at United. I knew it. I don't like it when people start that sort of discussion anyway. You can say I had an idea or I expected it, but until you say a reason why, then I don't think you can say, oh, I knew it, because you didn't know. Nobody knew. But then he started to give a reason why. And the first thing he said was the state of Manchester United right now. Okay, fair enough. It's a difficult place for anybody to go and be successful. We've seen that. And then he said the classic, and it's a farmers' league, isn't it? The Portuguese, it's a nothing league, isn't it? You come to England, you get found out. And it's so irritating that sort of opinion might get vindicated, because it's a complete nothing opinion. If you don't watch the Portuguese league, which I'm going to put my hands up and say I haven't watched much of it. I used to catch a bit of it when Tim Capel and Scott Minto were doing it regularly for TNT. But I guarantee that this football manager, who I was overhearing, didn't know anything about the Portuguese league. But there's just this like arrogance still around English football. Much like you saying, winning the Europa League is easier than the top 5. Actually, there might be a credible case for it, but it does still reek of that English football arrogance, which is so loathsome. It's so loathsome.
You're calling me loathsome.
And so for that opinion to be vindicated, if Amorim doesn't win it, I'd almost like him to win it just to show that he... And to do it with like a tactical masterclass against Tottenham, just to show that it's the situation at United that's an absolute tragedy, rather than this young, exuberant, fairly lively Portuguese manager who's obviously got some sort of tactical head on his shoulders, an ability to manage a football club well. And actually,
you'd like to think so, wouldn't you? Ollie? He's paid millions a year. Fingers crossed, mate.
I mean, this guy could be right as well. There is a strong chance. He's a Farmers League manager, and he's been found out in the Premier League.
What does Farmers League mean, by the way?
I think it's they sow the seeds with the players and then farm them out to.
Okay,
that's what the French.
I always used to think it was like they're farmers during the week and they play at the weekend.
Well,
like
the French have like a strong farmers union, don't they? And it was always Ligue 1 that was always referred to as a farmers league as well. True. So I always thought it was some sort of like horrible French stereotype. Because they're all bloody moaning farmers over there in France, aren't they?
Yeah, I've never really understood that phrase. We need a new one for the next gen.
Yeah.
One thing I will say about Ruben Amorim, that his clothes, mate, his fashion sense is spot on. You know that like black jacket he's got with like the multicolored collar? It's like a Paul Smith. I saw that. Obviously took a photo of it, ChatGPT, and it turns out it's like Paul Smith and 300 quid, so I'm not going to buy it. But I do really like it. He's got a great sense of style, whereas Ange is just like some grey tracky, you know. Anyway, we're not going to get on Ange. Yeah, I don't know what to say, man. I hope
Who do you want? Who do you want to win, and who do you think will win?
Tottenham. Obviously Tottenham. Like the Ange thing alone is hilarious. Like Tottenham's fan base, like they've been put through the mill bit. Man United win loads of trophies. Like they won the Europa League a few years ago, didn't they? With Mourinho. I mean, maybe 10 years ago, 8 years ago, whatever it was. So yeah, I don't know. I definitely want Tottenham to do it. I think it'd be absolutely hilarious. Absolutely hilarious if Ange wins it.
But who do you think will win it?
I think Man United will win it for 3 reasons. One, because they're better in finals and big games. They've won trophies the last couple of years, really. They just get it done. 2, I think they've gone to the San Mamés, where the final's being played in Bilbao, and they won against Athletic Club 6 weeks ago, so that'll be fresh in the memory. They'll know the dressing room, they'll know the pitch, all this kind of stuff. And 3, I think Tottenham have got Maddison's injured, Kulusevski's injured, like they're 2 best creative forces, really. And so I think for Tottenham to win the final, they're relying on their defence. And if they can keep it tight and prevent Man United from doing anything and then pinch one maybe, I just think Man United are a better side as well. I think Man United in the table should probably be like 8th or 10th based on their squad, whereas Tottenham I think are probably, I don't know, because they've had loads of injuries. But I do think Man United are better than Tottenham. Let's talk about other football. Ollie, first betting tip probably ever on Not Another Sports Pod. It's coming in hot. You ready?
Hit me.
Right. There's a competition in South America called the Copa Sudamericana, which is South America's Europa League. It is pretty niche, let's be honest. They're currently in the group stages of the competition. There is a football club called Cienciano of Peru. They play in Cusco. I watched them the other night. They are the best side that I've seen in the Sudamericana so far this season. They're top of the group, Group H. They played 5, they've won 2, they've drawn 3. So they haven't lost in their 5 games. Now, how it works in the Sudamericana is they're probably going to go through to the last 16. There's another playoff round, which I won't talk to you about. But essentially, they're in the knockout stages. They're still in the competition after the groups. And that is the last 16 of the tournament. And yet, when I checked the price for them to win it, Ollie, I found last night, I didn't back it last night, I'm going to back it today. They are 350 to 1 to win it. Now, that for me is the bookies have made a mistake there. Because you can't have a side that's in the last 16 at 350 to 1. The only caveat here is that they're not guaranteed of a last 16 spot because there's still 1 game to play in the group stages and they might go into the playoff round. But they will be in the last 16. And Cienciano of Peru, and they play in Cusco, by the way, nice high altitude. They're the best side I've seen in the Sudamericana this season, and they're 350 to 1. Obviously, don't put a lot of money on it. My caveat here is do not put more than £1 on it. But you should put £1 on Cienciano of Peru winning the Sudamericana. Not because it's going to happen, because it's not, but because it shouldn't be 350 to 1. So you'll lose that £1. Don't worry about that. But that is an incorrect pricing from the bookies. And obviously everything's done now, I assume, Ollie, on like AI, and there's no one actually watching Cienciano games. I will put it to you, mate, that I know more about the Sudamericana than the bookies. I've watched more. Like there's no one really that's watching as much Sudamericana, I don't think, is like me. I'm actually watching the whole games. Like, they can't. Do you know what I mean? In the world, like, who's watching more Sudamericana than me? No one. And no one's watching Cienciano more than me. No one's actually analysed the team, watched them, thought about it than me. So the bookies, if you're listening to this bookies, you've got that wrong. They should not be 350 to 1. They should be about 35 to 1. So go out and put £1 on Cienciano of Peru to win the Copa Sudamericana 2025.
There is one person watching more Sudamericana football than you, and that is Fish Lips McGee, who does all of the commentator updates on who's commentating on what around the world, and even he gets every single commentator from the Copa Sudamericana. So
how does he do that? It must be a team of them, because he watches every game like night or day.
No idea.
Must be a team.
No, absolutely no idea. It was interesting actually, because as you were talking there, I was just having a quick look. Obviously, the format hasn't changed this year for the Libertadores or the Sudamericana. So, unfortunately, you're going to have the trouble, which is kind of what the Sudamericana has always had, of the Libertadores sides dropping out. And you know right now as well that it's going to be Independiente del Valle finishing 3rd in their group behind River Plate, and I can't remember who else is in there now. and they're going to finish ahead of Barcelona, and they'll just drop down into the Sudamericana and make it a third Sudamericana final victory, which is a shame because actually one thing to take away, I know you were saying I'm kind of bemoaning the quality of the Europa League and the Conference League, but it actually makes it more enjoyable that sides that have been in the competition throughout the whole of the year lift the trophy as compared to a side that's dropped out of the bigger competition, dropping down and then pinching it going into the knockout stages, which is kind of what tends to happen normally at that point. Who in this year's Libertadores is looking kind of the nuts, shall we put it in a rather...
Nobody.
Really?
Mate, it's poor. The best side in it is Palmeiras. I mean, you can probably say that the last 5 years. They're the best side in it. They've got the best coach. Palmeiras are this big football club in Brazil, for anyone that doesn't know. Abel Ferreira's their boss and has been for 5 years, and I think that consistency does lend itself to doing really well. Plus, you know, they're a rich club from Sao Paulo. I mean, they're the best side in it. I tell you what, River Plate under Gallardo look good in the groups, Ollie. So they'd be there. Flamengo are awful. They've really dropped off. It's so hard to say because the big Brazilian clubs always just do enough in the groups and then try and come alive in the knockout stages. But in terms of quality, I think Palmeiras by far and away the best side. Now I would put River probably in there at 2. Quite like Atlético Nacional of Colombia, but nothing stand out, mate.
It's such a crazy thing looking at the group stages and just seeing the names from footballing history. You don't have to be a connoisseur of South American football to have some of these just kind of roll off the tongue very nicely. I mean, Estudiantes and Botafogo in Group A, you'd imagine that Universidad de Chile aren't going to be able to hold on to that top spot through the final week of the competition in the group stage. River Plate, Independiente del Valle, of course, anybody that knows this podcast or our previous entities will know IDV and the joy that we have from them. But like Liga de Quito, Flamengo, Sao Paulo, Libertad, Racing, Colo-Colo, Atlético Nacional, Internacional, Palmeiras, Cerro Porteño, Vélez, Peñarol. I mean, they're Olympia. They're all big sides in their own right on footballing continent in South America and all have achieved greatness in the past. And it's such a shame that the football just doesn't reflect now the kind of former glories. And South America feels like a continent dining out on former glories in a lot of its football.
Yeah, and I think... it shouldn't be that way. I mean, look, I think half the reason is because they can't sell the Brazilian league. I think you can't find it on telly anywhere outside of Brazil, which is insane for a country with, you know, nearly 300 million people with a national side that's won the most World Cups, which has now got Carlo Ancelotti as their national team manager. There is money in Rio and Sao Paulo. There is money in Brazil. So it's a shame, man. And I think that it can happen, but they need to restructure the Brazilian league and they need to be able to sell the product. To get those clubs. And for Argentina, I mean, look, the Argentine side is a reflection of the Argentine economy. So it's going to be very difficult until you fix the Argentine economy because these clubs are like, you know, partially run by the members and the fans. It's not like just some random billionaire. Until you can fix the Argentine economy, and obviously until you can fix the economy of a lot of these South American nations, you're gonna struggle. Peñarol looked pretty decent this year, by the way. I mean, that's one that you'd always like to see do well, as you say. It's such an iconic name historically, won it 5 times. And Uruguay is such an interesting footballing place in terms of the heritage and the culture and the history, because it's a small country of 3 or 4 million people, about the same size as Wales, that have had, you know, punched above their weight for years and years. Right, let's talk about other football. Napoli are going to win Serie A, probably. Both Napoli and Inter drew at the weekend, didn't they? So Napoli are point clear with 1 game to play, Ollie?
Yeah, it's unfortunately, I don't think we're going to get the playoff decider that we were all hoping for, which is kind of a shame. But it's always too tantalising a prospect. I haven't looked at the final day of the season schedule just yet, actually. But I think 1 point. If it was going to happen, things needed to kind of readjust this weekend rather than going into the final day of the season. Never say never, but that would be nice. I mean, it's a miserable season. I mean, Milan lost the Coppa Italia final to Bologna, who get to go into the Europa League via that. You've got Lazio and Roma kind of bringing up the rear for the Europa League and Conference League spots. That's all taken care of, except for maybe if Lazio lose on the final day of the season and Fiorentina can nip in there. And then you got Atalanta again. I mean, it's such a positive footballing story. Atalanta's rise and sustained stay towards the top of the Serie A table, being in Champions League football consistently, renovating a ground but not creating a ground so large that, you know, it feels obtuse and out of place. they do everything right. And I still remember researching a Serie A game a few years ago, and they were one of just 4 teams in Serie A in the top flight in Italy that turned a profit, a legit financial profit. And I think more than anything else, supporting sides that are run well is the right thing to do in terms of just as a football viewing public. And then the fact they have so much turnover of players, and yet Gianpiero Gasperini just keeps on finding hidden gems left, right and centre just to spring in on loan or bring in on 2-3 year deals, raise them up and then ship them back out to elsewhere and to bigger sides. So it's a great story. So while the title fight at the top is the more interesting one going into the final day of the season, the fact that Atalanta are head and shoulders above the likes of Juventus, Roma, Lazio, Milan, it's
How much of that's down to Gasperini, and is Gasperini going to stay? Because I know there were reports linking him to Roma, and he's been there a while, and his contract, I think, ends at the end of the year. So does he stay, and how much of their success is down to Gasperini?
I think a huge part of the success is down to Gasperini. He's kind of had a lot of the say over the ins and outs at the football club in terms of the players that they've been able to bring in. He's very much in charge of his own style of football and the order of things. I think he's such a great, and this is the danger of becoming one of these, however, he's such a great manager linked with the club and is the kind of key consistent to their rise from being a side that would maybe battle with relegation to being a side that are now battling with the best in European football. When you go somewhere else, it's really difficult to have that same authority in a dressing room, particularly if you lose it early on, particularly if you're going to a side like Roma, in the capital city in Italy. They have huge aspirations, maybe ideas slightly above their station when it comes to where they should be finishing in Serie A. And if you walk in and go, well, out in the sticks in northern Italy, in Bergamo, we did this and this and this. If you don't have that respect and that authority straight away in the dressing room, things can change very quickly. And I just think if you're part of an indelible legacy at a club, when you step away, it should be to step away for a permanent time as opposed to anything else. I'd love to see him. I mean, he's not exactly the youngest spring chicken out there, Gasperini. So
looks great though.
Yeah, well, because he's had no stress, because he's just continued this iconic rise with Atalanta.
Warren Buffett. Man.
I mean, he's been at the club nearly 10 years now. It's one of the most, I think it's the longest running managerial appointment in the top 5 leagues on the continent.
It's got to be Simeone, surely. It must be tied.
Oh, maybe, yeah. Simeone will be close. Simeone will probably have that, actually. No, apologies.
But, I mean, after those two, there'll be a huge drop-off.
Yeah.
Because no one lasts 10 years. So, Simeone, Gasperini, I can't think of anyone else. I mean, next it'll be someone like Arteta, been there for 5 years, because the turnaround's so mad. Just sticking on Italy, Sampdoria, I know we're sort of a week late with this, but Sampdoria got relegated down to Serie. Why does that matter, Ollie? And put that into context of them as a football club and how big it is them dropping down to the 3rd tier.
Sampdoria are a bit like the Leeds United, I'd say, of Italian football, because just as things were getting really big with money, Samp won Serie A back in 1991. In the same way, Leeds were the last side to win the first division before it became the Premier League, and they never quite captured what a United and Arsenal or a Juve, a Milan and Inter kind of went on to do in the top flight. They never stayed in that rank and file at the very top of the order. And we've seen Leeds drop down the leagues before, and Samp are kind of similar. I mean, they've had rocky ups and downs over the last few years. They were down in Serie B, 15 years ago, 20 years ago. They're a big side in Italian football. You think about some of the players that have come through there in terms of Mancini, Chiesa, Lombardo, Ruud Gullit, David Platt, which some people have a wry smile at, but these were great players of 90s football, and it hasn't been the same in the last 20 years. It's been more of a fight and more of a struggle, and one of the most iconic looking sides, whether it's the night under the lights for the Derby della Lanterna against Genoa and the city comes alive and you've got this dark red and dark blue against the light blue of Samp, the iconic kit which so many people will recognise, particularly from our generation of Saturday morning Italian football highlights. Nobody has a shirt like Samp. It's a phenomenal piece of kit. And yeah, to see them down in Serie C is just kind of sad more than anything else. And the difference between English football and Italian football is when you get down there, you know, the money is pennies, absolute pennies, and you can get in real financial problems real quick if you're a big side like that.
Can I just give a shout out to my mate Dave Farini? Dave runs an outlet called Destination Calcio, and his website streams every game in the second tier of Italian football. He's got a podcast on Italian football, etc., etc. So yeah, just a little shout out to him because he's built that from absolutely nothing and now has a really good kind of audience and listener base, and it's like the only place to watch the second tier of Italian football. Not many people will be delving into that, but obviously it's a very niche USP. But there it is. Ollie, I don't know anything about the golf and the F1 this weekend, so I'm going to leave it for one of my favourite sections of the pod, which is the OW monologue. Take it away, my friend.
Golf this week, second major of the year, and we spoke after Rory won the Masters at great length about how it was an incredible night of sport, let alone an incredible night of golf, the emotions, but we also touched on the chat that immediately came after it, which was Rory's going to have pressure-free golf. That Masters hoodoo is now off his shoulders, and he could go and win every single major this year. Well, it wasn't the freaking case at all. Rory had an absolute shocker at Quail Hollow this weekend, and kind of the whole golf tournament was pretty lackluster. It's not, there was bad weather throughout the weekend, which meant that we were getting a lot of mud balls, and when you get mud on the ball, balls in the fairway, you can't clean it or anything like that, so you have to hit with the mud on the ball, and it affects the flight and the trajectory, and a lot of players were kind of having some struggles with that over the first few days, including world number one Scotty Scheffler. But on Saturday, Scheffler just put on a clinic to finish like 11 under on the week for the weekend in the end. While Rory's kind of just scraping by to make the cut at the other end of the spectrum, Scotty was just showing why he is the world number one right now. It was dull, consistent golf. And really, with kind of a 4-shot lead, 5-shot lead going into Sunday, didn't think anybody was really going to be able to test him. Jon Rahm put up a really good fight initially on Sunday and got the gap down to 1. But the trouble is because all of these other golfers know how good Scotty Scheffler is and how consistent Scotty Scheffler is, Jon Rahm started trying to force things on the latter few holes of his final round to try and force another birdie or maybe an eagle. And because he got forcing things, he got himself in trouble and ended up just dropping down the order. So Rahm finished, I think, 3rd or 4th this weekend. And only because he was basically trying to put the pressure on Scotty. And I'll always wonder if Rahm had just carried on playing normal golf, finished at maybe 9 under, possibly got it to 10 under, just being consistent through the last kind of 4 or 5 holes, rather than trying to force the issue. Would that have not been a better idea to put then the pressure on Scotty, who, let's face it, the last few holes at Quail Hollow are the toughest holes. It's meant to be a really tough finishing straight to kind of decide victors in tournaments, which is why you should never have shotgun starts. You should always have starting on the 1st and finishing on 18. And that would have surely, with just a 1-shot lead, forced Scotty to maybe play a little safer, or maybe just try and make sure he was like feeling a little bit of tension going down those last few holes, which in the end he was able to kind of cruise through the last few holes at a bit of a canter because there was no pressure, because everybody was trying to force the issue. And I just don't think that's something you can necessarily do in golf. And it makes life actually a lot easier then for Scheffler, because he's got a 4-shot lead with kind of 4 holes remaining, and it doesn't matter too much. Big highlight of the whole weekend, was the fact that leading after the first day or two, Jonathan Vegas, kind of certainly not considered a consistent major contender at all, the South American, but it did mean that we had a lot of references to Johnny Vegas at the top of the leaderboard, which every time I heard that, I could just think of the British comedian, which amused me greatly over the whole weekend. And it's a bit of a come down from the Masters, because you can watch the Masters, we go there every single year, you know what hole people are on just by looking at the camera shots. It's such an iconic golf course. Quail Hollow doesn't really have that, except for maybe the 17th. Everything else just all blends into one a little. And it's kind of a problem that you have with the PGA Championship in general. I think it's considered the lesser of the 4 majors. The US Open is on considerably tougher courses in tough conditions. And you think about what Pinehurst number 2 was like last time. It's been held at Pebble Beach, which everybody knows inside out as well, or a lot of golf fans do anyway. And then the Open courses, they have a number of iconic holes. They look completely different, obviously, to the US courses anyway. And as I say, we go to the Masters all the time. I just don't think it was a very interesting venue. And were it not for Rahm putting on a bit of a show on the middle part of the Sunday, I think it could have been an even more drab and boring come down from what we had at the last major 4 weeks ago. And now we all just sit and get ready for the US Open coming up in 4 weeks' time. And you wouldn't bet on Scotty Scheffler
End of June, right?
Yeah.
And then the Open's in July.
Yeah, on
End
the
of July.
Middle of July, around about the 18th.
Third Friday in July, around then.
Yeah. So we're going to be on the ground for the Open. Got a couple of days tickets, so we're going to be
lovely
Wednesday and Thursday over in Ireland doing the last
mate,
last
lovely stuff.
practice
You and the
day.
missus or mates, or what are you up to?
Me and a friend are going to go. I picked up the tickets, and
Nice.
it's 85 quid for the Thursday. And the doors open at 5:30 in the morning. The first tee off is at 6:30. And the last person walking off the golf course will probably be at about 8:30, 9 o'clock as the sun's going down. For value for money, and I've said it before on this, live golf is the best value for money for a punter for going to see a huge sporting event in this country. In the US, they charge stupid prices and the Masters is crazy expensive. But the Open...
But the salaries are high. So it's just
But the Open... is still part of that. Like, why are they only charging 80 quid? And I hope they continue to only charge 85 quid for the first couple of days. It's like
Brits can't afford more than that, mate.
Yeah.
Whereas Americans can afford to spend 300, 400, 500 grand on a...
Yeah.
Anyway, I don't want to venture into Broken Britain. We'll save that for another... not another not another politics pod is pending. The Open... Also, it's the oldest of the majors.
Yeah.
1860, I'm looking now. Isn't that bonkers, man? The first one was in 1860.
154th running of the Open, this will be.
Unreal, that, man. Unreal.
It's amazing.
What else?
People joke about kind of, golf, such an old, fussy sport, etc. But when you've got origins going back that far and the rules and traditions are still the same, I think it's actually something to, rather than being like, oh, it's all too fussy and everybody's got to have their shirt tucked in and you're not allowed to wear shorts on the tour and all this kind of stuff. It's like, no, but that's nice. It's kind of nice that...
Love it.
While all the kit has changed and everything like that, we're still upholding some of the values of 150 years ago when the sport was in its infancy. And it's a beautiful thing to behold. And you can... track the winners. If you win an Open Championship, you can track the winners all the way back for 154 years. I mean, it's superb. And there's no like NAF Premier League Hall of Fame and rubbish vote now. I've been having notifications all day because some thing has got in my calendar for like vote for your Premier League player awards or something because I've accidentally opened an email or whatever. And I'm just like... no, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to vote online for anything. I don't want that. And I like that golf is still a bit like that as well. Curmudgeon. I wish nothing had changed in the last 154 years and everything was the same as it was when the first Open Championship
in the sporting world, I should say.
No. Let's get rid of all of the medical tech that we've kind of got to. I want to be working on people with sledgehammers rather than dentists.
Antibiotics, average age of 42. Yeah, that kind of
beautiful
stuff.
Beautiful time.
I mean, it's the greatest time to be alive, 2025, for all its sins, let's say. Ollie, just to pick up on something you said about the price of sports tickets, because you sent me something this week which I think you expected me to agree with and I did not. You sent me something saying the average World Cup ticket is $300 US, right? $300 US dollars per ticket. So my thing there is my kickback was I actually think that's not bad value because it's a World Cup. So I don't mind things like a major, like in golf or a Grand Slam in tennis or a World Cup ticket being extortionate because it's at most once a year. In the World Cup's case, it's once every 4 years. What offends me is like the weekly, like a Premier League ticket being 60, 70 quid when someone's potentially got to cough that up every other week for a home game. So, yeah, I don't mind a World Cup average ticket being $300 US. I don't think it's the biggest offence in the world.
But aren't you still pricing fans out of being able to go who would love to have that opportunity. Like, it shouldn't be only elites can go. World Cup tickets should never be averaging around about $305 US for group stage tickets as well. We're not talking knockouts. We're talking bare minimum group stage. I mean, yeah.
Andorra San Marino as well in the 2018 World Cup, isn't it? So
I mean, it's ludicrous. We spoke about the Ryder Cup tickets, $750 US. And my friend was very much contemplating it. He's just had a child, and they were thinking that maybe they might risk it for a biscuit or something and go with the kid. Kids don't go free for like under 2. No. You got to get another ticket for that. Insane. So you're paying over $2,000 for 3 tickets to go to a Ryder Cup where you see less golf.
Why would you take a 1-year-old to the Ryder Cup?
Yeah, I mean, look, we don't need to dive into that. There's a lot.
We're not parents, so like, look, I fully understand it's hard to comprehend how you balance things, but I don't get why you take a 1-year-old to the Ryder Cup. It's like no.
I wouldn't take a child under the age of 7 to the golf because you want them to not be bored and you want them to be quiet. And those are two things that I imagine are quite difficult if you go to a golf tournament for a day, to have the child being quiet at the right times all the time. So I'm not saying they shouldn't be allowed to go. I'm just saying that is a big risk that you're taking as a parent.
One of the most insane things about covering South American football, Ollie, is you'll be doing a game that's like 11, like kick-off 10 p.m. in Colombia, and like there's people there with like their 2-year-old kid like eating snacks. Is like in a football stadium at 10 p.m. You've got like a 2-year-old eating. I don't know. It's bonkers. Just totally different cultural thing, I guess. I'm not saying it's right or wrong.
I just don't want people going back to these
Definitely
ticket prices. I just don't want people to miss out on what are great events. Like Formula One has always been expensive, and we'll get onto that in a moment in terms of what happened on the weekend. But like, it's now getting ludicrous because, and I'm so sure it's just because of the kind of Instagram, I want to be seen to be at this thing, even if I don't really care about it. The value of garnering the attention of going to an event is more important than valuing the actual event itself to a lot of people. And that means that people that actually value the event are missing out on opportunities to see something that they would love to have a chance to go and see in the flesh.
Let's talk F1.
Let's talk F1. What did you see of the race this weekend?
None of it, Ollie. So you tell me, mate.
Oscar Piastri puts his McLaren on pole yet again in qualifying, showing that he is the faster, I think, of the two McLaren drivers over 1 lap pace compared to Lando Norris. McLaren, without a doubt, the best car in the field right now, and yet Max Verstappen's able to have an absolutely sensational drive in his Red Bull to win at the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix, formerly known as the San Marino Grand Prix. Yeah,
when I heard, because I did hear that on the radio this weekend, and I was like, that didn't used to be called that, did it? So why is it?
I wonder, because it's obviously the circuit where Senna died, and I wonder if they changed it. It could just be the kind of principality kind of laws changing or something like that, but I think they changed it to take away the fact that everyone associated the San Marino Grand Prix with 2 deaths in a weekend and the death of arguably the greatest driver of all time in Ayrton Senna. And I wonder if that was maybe just a branding change more than anything else. Now it's the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix. It's been that for a few years now, but it's also been that for the years where branding is more important than anything else. So, yeah, I've wondered if it's been that. And yeah, great drive from Verstappen. You had a problem as well with the McLarens were on slightly different tyre wear, both on hard tyres towards the end of the race, but Norris had fresher hard tyres, but he was stuck behind Piastri for a while, so that kind of ate into his opportunity to be able to get on the back of Max Verstappen and really push him through the final few laps or so. I think Norris finished about 6 seconds behind with Piastri just on his tail, and it shows that if the McLarens don't get it right with their driver pairings, again, Red Bull still have a shot at a driver's title, maybe not a constructor's title right now, because unfortunately Yuki Tsunoda, who stepped up after Liam Lawson being sacked after 3 races for Red Bull this season, and Yuki Tsunoda taking his seat, hasn't had the big impact that I think Red Bull were necessarily hoping for.
Why was he sacked?
Because he was rubbish. They promoted him to the top team, promoted him through through to the Red Bull car alongside Max Verstappen after getting rid of Sergio Perez. And their seat at Red Bull is just a continued poison chalice for anybody that takes it, because there are so many drivers. Alex Albon, Pierre Gasly, Sergio Perez. I mean, Perez looked like a great driver before he took the seat and had some decent runs in that Red Bull second seat alongside Max Verstappen, but never produced consistently. Pierre Gasly left Red Bull after struggling alongside Max Verstappen and looked like a really good driver for a few years, particularly with Alpine. And then Alex Albon has left Red Bull and gone to Williams and has dragged that Williams car up the grid kicking and screaming with some sensational drives. So nobody seems to be able to get it right alongside Max Verstappen, but everybody can drive well when they're not partnering the Dutchman in that top-tier car, which is a mind-blowing thing. And then we've got this Lewis Hamilton-Ferrari situation where Hamilton this week was asking for a bit of time and patience because they're not having the season that they were hoping for. Obviously, Lewis going there this year, he's not competitive at the top end of the field. I think you're foolish if you thought he was going to be competitive, because this Ferrari isn't a car that's going to be competitive at the top end of the field, really. And a lot of people were kind of saying, was it the wrong move for Lewis? Mercedes maybe does it look better. I think at certain tracks it will be the Mercedes. I think at other tracks the Ferrari actually looked reasonably good this weekend. But Lewis is asking for patience because he believes in 3 years' time this will be a Ferrari that will be able to compete at the right end of the grid. But we've got all these rule changes coming up next year in terms of the engine regulations. So it's kind of all up in the air to see what actually happens with that. Could be a big deciding factor if Lewis Hamilton finishes at the top of his career once again with Ferrari, or if he ends up just being a middle-of-the-pack driver.
How's your sponsorship going, Ollie, for the Golf?
We're
You getting creeping towards the target?
Stalling at around about 650. So
that's a lot of money, man.
Over halfway there. I wanted to get 1,000, so just need a few more people with a few more £10 and £20 donations to get it done. And your mate to, pony up the cash to 50 quid for 50p a hole that I do make. Plus any additional.
The meeting of my mate JW and Mr. Wilson's gonna be great one day, because he likes a round of golf as well, Ollie. So it could be about you two facing off at some point. Gary Lineker, I recognise the upset I've caused Lineker to leave BBC sooner than planned after anti-Semitism row. Do we care? Are we going to touch that?
What? I haven't seen Lineker's Did he say? Is Lineker a Holocaust denier?
Wilson with the Arsene Wenger. I absolutely love it. Didn't see it. Don't ask me. Don't cancel me.
Was this in reference to VAR or something like that? Like he made? I don't know. What's Lineker done?
I recognise the upset I've caused Lineker to leave BBC sooner than planned after anti-Semitism row. I think it's to do with like wars and stuff. I don't know. Yeah. Anyway, we're not touching it. Obviously.
Oh, he's gone on a Israel-Palestine.
I mean, the algo. No one can escape the algo. The algo is just in Lineker's head, isn't it? And he's just there. He's tweeting. He's at home with a glass of red. Doesn't matter how much money's in the bank, how busy you are with the businesses. You go on social media, man. It's gonna suck you in and make you care about everything that's going on in the world.
And it's good to care about things that are going on in the world, but you don't have to voice your opinion on everything. It's really easy to read Twitter and not tweet. Or X, I guess it's called now.
Yeah,
and not
just
X.
get angry and silent like everyone else, man.
Form some horrible opinions based on what the algorithm is feeding you. Stay in your own little bubble and don't bother voicing it to the rest of the world. And be like us, because you're scared that if anybody will read it, they'll go, "Oh my god, that person's insane."
Mate, I literally believe the last YouTube video I watched. I don't pick a side. I'll watch a YouTube video and be like, wow, yeah, I totally believe that. And the next thing, Al goes throwing the completely opposite view, and I'll be like, yeah. So just go with that, man. Don't get stuck in one side or the other.
Just buy some NFTs and shut the fuck up, Lineker.
100%.
And Lineker leaving.
He's wanted to be sacked for ages, though, hasn't he?
I was gonna say Lineker leaving the BBC isn't a thing, is it? And it's definitely not a sports thing.
Mate, it's also, let's be real about this. Gary Lineker, he's obviously rich beyond anyone's wildest dreams, but he owns a third of that Goal Hanger podcast production company. That is massive, man. They run the rest is football, rest is politics. He owns a third of that company. That is huge. So he the BBC wage here or there, taxed at source. No, thank you. When he's running Goal Hanger through a limited company. Don't worry about it.
He's doing okay.
He's got cash.
Thoughts and prayers for Gary, though. What he does after match of the day, I don't know.
Hell of a presenter, though. I will say that. I do think he's a fantastic But if you just park all that, like, he's a fantastic presenter.
Reads an auto cue very well. Definitely on that. I just struggle. I think on live stuff, he's a bit more found out with his umming and ahhing. I always remember this of watching him do Match of the Day, and then when he was brought in on TNT, formerly BT, to do the Champions League, and he wasn't quite as smooth, particularly when you got to half-time and full-time, because it's less scripted. And it was, oh, okay, Gary's really good at presenting, but not the live presenting necessarily.
I agree with that. And now he's sort of leaving. We can sort of slag him off. But no, I think I completely agree. Like, a master in that very controlled environment, off the auto cue, Match of the Day, really difficult to do. And he was fantastic at that. But if you're talking live sport, Ollie, I agree with you. A Kelly Cates, a Gabby Logan, these people are better and sharper at reacting to someone in their ear at the last minute. Goal's gone in there. He said that. She said that. Like, Kelly Cates, by the way, she's so good, man. Like, she's so good on live sport. There's a situation, bearing in mind, she's always got, I know we talked about this before, but she's always got Roy Keane, Gary Neville, Jamie Carragher. These are big personalities around her. And the fact she can just kind of play them off against each other and poke them just enough and just says like a word sometimes. Like, I saw her on something with Roy Keane and someone the other day, and they were like giving this huge rant and stopped, and she said, because, like, ... She just said one word because they made a point. She was like, or she just said, why? Like, just puts in one word and then they're off on another, like, 10-minute rant. She's fantastic at doing that. So, yeah, one of the very best. Any other business?
Well, I was going to say, do you think, I know they've kind of already decided what they're going to do with things like Match of the Day and stuff, but do you think it should actually be done by someone who is a broadcaster rather than an athlete? Because they were, very lucky, for instance, with Lineker, that he stepped in. He's an ex-player, but he was able to do what he does. And there are a lot of sportsmen and women that have gone on to do really very good broadcasting careers. But are the best presenters for 99% of sport that we see actually those that haven't played and are broadcasters only?
Well, if you look at the three that Match of the Day took, Mark Chapman never played at any high level, right? Obviously, Gabby Logan was an Olympic gymnast, and Kelly Cates never played at a level. So I don't know is the answer to your question, Ollie. Yeah, I don't know, mate.
Because I think about the best broadcasters out there right now. Mark Chapman is without a doubt, I think, the best overall broadcaster in this country.
I think he's the best radio broadcaster, Mark Chapman.
I think he's good on TV, to be honest, and he does so many sports really well, and that's such a great ability to have. He can bounce from rugby to cricket to golf to football to American football seamlessly, which is a really strong talent. I think Kelly Cates, as you've touched on, is awesome. Probably the best football broadcaster that Sky have at this time. And Mark Pugac as well, who I think is a radio on Grandstand, radio broadcaster, was unbelievably good. Pugac, another one who can just bounce around the place all the time and stay on whatever sport is needed. And I just think that Match of the Day having purely kind of broadcasters, Gabby Logan aside, she is probably one of the best that the Beeb have, to be honest, even though she's a former athlete, but is a strong point to have.
The only thing I'd say is that the BBC obviously have gone with those three presenters for Match of the Day. I personally would have just given it to Kelly Cates because I think she's football, whereas like Chapman and Logan are amazing in their own right, but they're both, as you say, they're quite all sports. I mean, Gabby Logan's definitely all sports, and Chapman can also loves his American sport and other bits and pieces, likes his golf. So I would have just made a decision giving it to Kelly Cates because she's so football.
Also, yeah, Chapman's got Match of the Day too as well. He's been doing that for ages. So I mean, he does a lot of football anyway. But he's good on Match of the Day too because he can bring the banter, the jokes, and all that kind of stuff. Whereas on Match of the Day, you want a slightly more serious look at it. But I think it'll be a better show for it. You'll have.
You don't listen to TalkSport anymore, do you?
I delve into it. It's still like the main radio station in my car. So when I jump in the car, it will still come on, and then I'll be like, oh no, I have to turn it down.
I think there's two shows on TalkSport that we're properly wandering off pod topic here. We'll wrap up in a couple of minutes. But there's two shows on TalkSport I think are fantastic. Trans-Euro Express with Danny Kelly, who doesn't pretend to have all the answers, but definitely has all the passion in that kind of unique broadcast style. And then he just throws to Andy Brassel, who obviously knows everything. We'd love to have him on Not Another Sports Pod one day. I'm sure Ollie's got the contacts that can make it happen. And then the other one, which is really old school, and I shouldn't like this, but I do. It's like the sports bar on TalkSport with Jamie O'Hara and Jason Cundy. It's like 10 p.m. to 1 a.m. I'm in tears laughing at that show, which is such a rare thing. And it is like old school banter, but it's so funny, man. I think it's hilarious. Anyway, yeah, there we go. What's your favourite thing to watch? What's your favourite sporting show at the moment on radio or telly, Ollie?
Ooh, that is a good question. Like
consistent show.
I listen to a lot of sports podcasts more than like live broadcasts and stuff like that. I don't necessarily tune in for everything.
What's your favourite sports podcast then?
The Chipping Forecast with Andrew Cotter and Ian Carter and Eddie Pepperell, because you've got Andrew Cotter, who is this just smooth as silk Scottish voice, but is very much playing the everyman when it comes to talking about golf. He's the human personality in it. Then you've got Ian Carter, who's the head of golf coverage at BBC Sport. He's a fantastic writer. He's got the in-depth knowledge. He's out on course watching all the biggest events live from the journalist point of view. And then you've got Eddie Pepperell, who is a current golfer who has been going through the ringer with his career in terms of he's lost his tour card for the DP World Tour. He's now on kind of the third tier of golf, and he's just said he's going to step away from the game for a little bit because it's not making him happy. But you get that player insight as well. So if you do need something to listen to after this, they're much less actually, no, they're very rambly, but they are very golf focused as well. That is one of the best podcasts out there because you get the three different viewpoints of the everyman, the journalist, and the athlete themselves, which is great.